I was standing in a ballroom full of corpses and they were all smiling at me. That's from story 2. But let me tell you about all 3 true New Year's Eve horror stories you're about to hear. First, a Y2K party at a remote cabin where the clock runs backwards, and photos prove this exact party has happened every 100 years since 1899. Second, an urban explorer enters an abandoned Art Deco hotel and finds 200 preserved bodies from a 1982 New Year's gala. Bodies that start moving at 11:58 p.m. Third, a small-town radio DJ gets calls from people in different time zones all saying the same thing. It happens at midnight. Then she sees the news. Every caller died exactly when they said they would. These stories are real, they're documented, and they happened on New Year's Eve. By the end, you'll know what's really waiting when the clock strikes 12. This is Doorway Stories. Let's begin. Story 1. The Millennium Loop. I didn't ease into it. I was already trapped when it started, slammed against the cabin's wood-paneled wall as the air turned brittle cold and my own shadow slid away from my feet like it had finally gotten permission to disobey me. The grandfather clock in the corner wasn't ticking forward anymore. Its hands jerked like a panicked insect, snapping from 11:58 to 11:59 to 12 AM. And then, impossibly, back to 1899 like the cabin couldn't decide what year it wanted to kill us in. Evan was shouting my name, but his voice sounded far away, muffled, as if the room had filled with invisible snow. Something moved behind the walls, not footsteps, more like pressure, like a huge body turning in sleep. And then the lights died, not flickered, died. 1 second we had warm yellow bulbs and stupid laughter and champagne. The next we had darkness with a faint blue glow leaking in from the windows, like moonlight had learned a new color. I remember thinking one clear thought. This is the part people talk about later, the part where you realize you're not going home. But what happened next changed everything, because the door we'd all come through opened, and it opened into the same room we were already standing in. 3 hours earlier, I'd been the boring one, the practical one, the software engineer who got dragged to a remote Catskills cabin for a Y2K party because it'll be historic, because if computers crash, we'll all laugh about it together. I wasn't afraid of midnight. I was afraid of my friends getting too drunk and trying to drive down a mountain road. The cabin belonged to a friend, some cheap rental with outdated furniture and a grandfather clock nobody even mentioned, until I noticed its second hand stuttering like it was choking. "Probably needs oil," I said, and they nodded because everyone likes a rational answer. But at 10:47 my digital watch blinked and showed 00 for one breath-long second, then switched to a date that made my stomach drop, December 31st, 1899, before correcting itself. I laughed because that's what you do when your brain doesn't want to accept a problem yet. I told myself it was a glitch, a Y2K joke, a bad battery. I told myself a lot of things. Then I found the first photograph. It was behind a loose plank in the hallway, an old Polaroid wedged into the wall like someone hid it in a hurry. The picture was of our group in the living room, 6 people shoulder to shoulder, champagne raised, the same ugly lamp in the background, the same crooked painting above the fireplace. Except the date printed on the bottom was wrong. Not wrong like a misprint, wrong like a threat, DEC 31, 1899. I stared until my eyes hurt because the woman in the center, hair pinned back, face pale, was me. Not similar to me. Me. Same scar under my left eyebrow from when I was 14. Same slight unevenness in my smile. My hands started to shake so badly the photo rattled. I shoved it in my pocket and went back into the living room, trying to act normal, trying to keep my voice steady when I asked, "Hey, did anyone bring a Polaroid camera?" Everyone laughed. No one owned one. No one had even seen one in years. And then, like the cabin heard the question and wanted to answer, the old radio on the shelf clicked on by itself. Static at first. Then a voice, tinny and distant, counting down in a language I didn't recognize. It wasn't English. It wasn't Spanish. It sounded older than both, like the mouth that spoke it had forgotten how to be human. The hairs on my arms rose, and the room got quiet in that way parties never do unless something has gone wrong. Evan crossed the room and slapped the radio, annoyed, but the sound didn't stop. It didn't even change volume. It just kept counting. The grandfather clock's pendulum swung wider, faster, like someone had pushed it. "Turn it off," Mia whispered. "Just unplug it." Evan yanked the cord from the wall. The radio kept counting. But what happened next changed everything, because the cord fell to the floor and it was still warm, as if it had been plugged into something alive. I went back to the hallway. I don't know why. Maybe because some part of me believed the answer was hiding where the photo had been. I pulled the loose plank again, my fingers numb, and more Polaroids slid out like teeth from a jaw. Dozens. All dated December 31st, 1899. All of us. Different moments from the night we hadn't lived yet. Mia crying in the kitchen, Evan pounding on a door that wasn't there, Jonah staring at the grandfather clock with a look like prayer. And the last one, the one that made me gag, was labeled 12 a.m. We were in the living room, frozen mid-scream, and behind us, filling the corner of the photo, was a shape so dark it looked like the film had burned. No face, no eyes. Just a mass that bent the light around it like midnight given a body. I ran back to the living room clutching the photos, and when I opened my mouth to speak, the grandfather clock chimed once. Not 12, not even 2. One chime, low and wrong, vibrating in my chest. The temperature dropped so fast our breath showed. Mia said, "Why is it cold?" Like the cabin had control over weather. Jonah tried the thermostat. The screen was blank. Evan went to the fireplace to light it, but the matches wouldn't catch. Not damp. Dead. As if flame had been removed from the rules of the room. The radio's countdown continued, now under the sound of something else, a faint scraping in the walls like nails dragging along the inside. I slapped the photos on the coffee table. "Look," I said, and my voice cracked. "Tell me this is a prank." Everyone stared, and the first moment of real fear hit the room like a physical thing. Not jump scare fear. The heavy kind that makes your stomach sink because your brain has finally stopped negotiating. Evan's face went white. Mia started backing away from the table, shaking her head, whispering, "No, no, no." But what happened next changed everything, because the photo labeled 12 a.m. wasn't still anymore. I watched it shift. I swear on my life the image moved by a fraction, like a living thing settling. The dark shape in the corner seemed closer, as if it had leaned toward the camera. Jonah snatched the photo up and threw it into the sink, then turned the faucet on full blast as if water could drown paper and whatever was inside it. The ink didn't run. The photo didn't bend. It sat there, perfect, like plastic. Then the sink began to fill without draining, the water rising too fast. Swelling like the plumbing had become a throat trying to gag. "Okay," Evan said, forcing a laugh that sounded like sobbing. "We're leaving, everyone. Coats now." We grabbed our things, hands clumsy, minds screaming to get out. Evan yanked the front door open and stepped into the living room. He stumbled backward like he'd hit a wall. "What the—" he started, and Mia screamed because behind the open door was our couch, our coffee table, our stupid photos. The same room, the same air, the same backwards clock. Evan slammed the door shut and opened it again, harder. Living room. Again. Jonah tried the back door. Living room. Mia ran to a window and pulled the curtain back. Outside was black, not night black, but blank black, like someone had painted over the world. Her reflection stared back at her, and for one heartbeat it smiled even though her mouth was open in a scream. But what happened next changed everything, because her reflection lifted its hand and pressed its palm to the glass from the other side. That's when the shadows started acting wrong. At first it was subtle, my shadow lagging behind my movements by half a second. Jonah's shadow stretching too long. Evan's shadow turning its head when he didn't. Then, at 11:56, the radio's countdown hit a word that made my teeth ache, and every shadow in the room slid sideways, peeling off the floor like wet paper. Mine wrapped around my ankle and tightened, cold as deep water. I tried to kick it off, and it only climbed higher, pulling me toward the corner where the grandfather clock stood trembling. The clock face flickered with years. 1799, 1899, 1999, 2099, like it was searching for the right door to open. In the corner, the darkness thickened. Not a shadow, but a presence, the feeling of something huge deciding to wake up. I couldn't see it, but my ears popped like altitude change, and my vision tunneled as if the room had become a fist closing around us. Mia was crying, begging, "Please, please, please," to nothing. Evan was punching the wall, leaving bloody smears. Jonah was praying under his breath, and the grandfather clock's hands snapped to 11:59. I don't know what made the thought come. Maybe panic, maybe training, maybe my brain grabbing the only tool it had left. Y2K. The fear of midnight wasn't just superstition. It was a known flaw. Systems confused, dates rolled over, logic broke at the edge of a new era. This thing fed at thresholds. It needed us to be present at 12 Mortals, to witness it, to complete whatever loop it had built here. So I did the most insane, simplest thing I could think of. I tried to steal midnight from it. I crawled, dragging my trapped leg, nails tearing on wood toward the grandfather clock. The cold pressed into my lungs like glass. The shadow around my calf pulsed, squeezing, trying to stop me. I reached the clock's face and jammed my fingers under the glass, prying until it snapped free. The hands quivered. My skin burned where I touched them, ice burn, the kind that feels like fire. And I shoved the minute hand forward. It resisted like pushing against a living muscle. The radio screamed with static. The darkness in the corner surged, the pressure spiking so hard my vision went gray. Jonah shouted, "Diana, stop!" But I couldn't. I forced the hand past 12 hours, past the moment the thing wanted, straight to 12:01. The second the hand clicked into place, the cabin made a sound like a throat clearing. The shadows recoiled, snapping back under our feet. The pressure released so suddenly we all collapsed, gasping like we'd been underwater. And from the corner came a sound that wasn't a voice, wasn't a scream, but the closest thing to both, rage and hunger and disappointment all at once, like an animal denied its meal. The grandfather clock cracked down the center, and the front door, just the regular front door, swung open onto the porch. We didn't speak. We ran. Snow hit our faces like needles, and the outside world looked too bright, too normal, like we'd been dropped from one reality into another. Behind us, the cabin groaned. The windows dimmed as if the light inside was being sucked away. When we reached the car and slammed the doors, I looked back in time to see the cabin fold inward, not collapse like wood and nails, but fold like paper. One sharp crease, then nothing, like it had been tucked back into whatever year it belonged to. Evan turned the key and the engine coughed, then started. We drove until the road hit a highway, until we saw another car, until we saw a gas station with fluorescent lights that didn't flicker. Only then did my hands stop shaking enough to open my pocket and pull out the Polaroid I'd stuffed there earlier. It wasn't the 1899 photo anymore. The date at the bottom read DEC 31-2099. The picture showed the same cabin, intact, restored, glowing warmly against snowy trees. In the window stood a group of teenagers holding drinks, laughing like my friends had laughed, and in the center was a girl who had my eyes. My blood turned to ice because she was looking straight at the camera like she knew someone was watching. And behind her, in the corner of the window, was a dark shape that bent the light around it, patient as a century. I dropped the photo onto the floor of the car as if it was burning me, and for the first time all night, the radio, our car radio, crackled to life without anyone touching it. A voice, tinny and distant, began to count down in a language older than fear. Story 2, the Ascension Hotel. The ballroom was full, every table set, every glass raised, except nobody was alive. I stood in the doorway with my flashlight shaking in my fist, watching 200 preserved party guests in 1982 tuxedos and sequin dresses rise from their chairs at the exact same time, like a single string had been pulled through all their spines. Their skin had that waxy, too-perfect look of something embalmed, and every one of them wore the same fixed smile. Lips stretched as if they'd been told to look happy for the camera and never stop. Then the band started playing. Not from a speaker, not from an old record, real brass and percussion echoing through the decayed Art Deco hall. A song with a jaunty New Year's rhythm that made my stomach turn because it didn't match what I was seeing. The dancers began to move, slow at first, and as they rotated in stiff little circles, their shoes brushed the dusty floor with the softest sh sound, like sandpaper on bone. I tried to back out, to blink myself awake, but the air had thickened into something syrupy and the smell hit me. Old perfume trapped in fabric for decades, sweet rot under it, champagne long turned to vinegar. I remember thinking one clear, stupid thought. I came here for proof. I came here for content. But what happened next changed everything, because every smiling head turned at once and locked onto me, and I realized they weren't dancing for themselves. They were dancing because they'd been waiting for an audience. Earlier that night, I'd been excited in the way only an obsessed person can be. The Vandermeer Hotel, abandoned since the early 80s, condemned, fenced off, whispered about in my city like a dare, had been my white whale for months. The legend was always the same. New Year's Eve, 1982. A black tie gala. 200 guests went in, only 47 came out at dawn. The rest vanished, and the survivors either went insane or went silent, like their mouths had been sealed from the inside. I didn't believe in ghosts. I believed in hidden basements, cults, crimes covered by money and time. I believed that a good flashlight, a camera, and a little courage could turn a rumor into a viral episode. So at 10:53 p.m. on December 31st, I slipped through a gap in the fence with my recorder running and my heart beating like it was chasing me. The lobby still looked rich even in ruin. Gold leaf peeling like old scabs, marble floors cracked with weeds, chandeliers hanging crooked as broken teeth. My footsteps echoed too loudly, and the building answered with little settling groans that sounded like distant sighs. I found the ballroom doors half open, but I didn't go in yet. Something about the darkness beyond them felt occupied, not by a person, but by a presence that had claimed the space and didn't want it disturbed. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself it was adrenaline. Then I spotted the security office sign, and the part of me that loves puzzles took over. Inside, the room was cramped and untouched, like someone had locked it in a hurry and never returned. An old monitor sat on a desk, thick with dust. A VCR rested beneath it with tapes stacked in neat rows, each labeled in careful block letters. Dick 31, 1982, 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m., 11:30 p.m., midnight. I slid the 11 p.m. tape in and hit play, expecting static. The screen flickered, then steadied into a grainy view of the ballroom from a high corner angle. The room was alive on the tape. Guests laughing, waiters weaving between tables, a band on stage. A man in a white jacket kissed a woman's hand and she threw her head back, laughing like she'd never be scared of anything. I felt that familiar thrill. This was real, this was evidence. But what happened next changed everything, because the timestamp hit 11:47 p.m. and the entire room began to move like it was being controlled. At first it looked like a coordinated dance, like the band had started a routine and everyone joined in. But the longer I watched, the wronger it became. The guests' faces weren't joyful anymore. They were strained, eyes wide, mouths still smiling in that forced social way. But the fear was trapped behind their teeth. People tried to stop. One woman grabbed her own arm like she was trying to restrain it. A man stumbled and reached for a chair, but their bodies corrected themselves, snapping back into rhythm. The band kept playing even as the musicians' expressions tightened into panic. Then I saw the waiters. They weren't dancing. They were standing perfectly still around the edges of the room, watching like guards at an execution. One of them raised a hand, and the dancers turned as one. Another waiter walked to the center carrying a tray of champagne flutes, and the dancers drank without lifting their hands, lips meeting glass like puppets being fed. I stopped the tape and the security office went so quiet my ears rang. The building's hum, electricity or wind or whatever makes old places sound alive, was gone. Then from somewhere deep in the hotel, music drifted up to me. Big band music, the same melody I'd just heard on the tape. I froze with my hand on the VCR, my skin prickling. There was no power in the building. My equipment was running on batteries. And yet the song swelled impossibly full, echoing through the walls as if the ballroom below had lit up and filled again. I told myself it was my mind replaying the tape. I told myself it was a nearby car stereo bleeding in through broken windows. But what happened next changed everything. Because when I stepped into the hallway, the music got louder and I smelled fresh champagne like someone had just poured it. I crept back toward the ballroom and pushed the doors open wider. My flashlight beam skimmed over tables draped in cloth that should have been moth-eaten. But the fabric looked clean, pressed, even softly gleaming. Confetti lay, scattered like someone had tossed it 5 minutes ago, not 42 years ago. And on the nearest table a champagne flute stood filled to the rim, bubbles rising in a steady stream. My breath caught. I stepped closer and saw fingerprints on the glass, wet and recent. Behind it another glass appeared, no clink, no hand placing it, just there like the air had decided it needed an extra prop. Then another. The table began to populate itself in silence, place settings blooming into existence one by one as if the hotel was rebuilding the party around me. I ran back to the security office, slammed the midnight tape into the VCR and hit play with shaking hands. The footage jumped forward, 11:58 p.m. The dancers were moving faster now, their bodies stiffer, their heads tilted at unnatural angles, smiles stretched too wide. The waiters stood in a tighter ring, and I realized they were older than the guests, not just in years but in posture, like priests in uniforms. At 11:59:30, every dancer stopped at once. The entire ballroom held still in a tableau of terror. Hundreds of faces pointed toward the center. Then the camera glitched, the picture warping like heat haze, and something entered the frame that the tape couldn't properly hold. A dark shape, not a person, not smoke, more like a hole cut into reality. The dancers lifted their glasses, their mouths opened in perfect unison. The timestamp hit 12 a.m. and the screen went black. The music in the hallway stopped too, like someone had cut a cord. In the sudden silence, a soft sound came from the ballroom. Shh, 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 like shoes moving on dust. I didn't want to look. Every instinct screamed not to look. But I did because curiosity has teeth and it always bites harder than fear until it's too late. When I opened the ballroom doors again, the guests weren't seated anymore. They were standing, arranged in pairs across the floor, hands lifted as if they were about to waltz. Their eyes were open now, milky, fixed, glass dull, and their smiles were even wider, as if the muscles had been pulled tighter over time. Their skin hadn't decayed. It had been preserved, polished, perfected into something display-ready. Like mannequins, like trophies. And then, from the shadows near the stage, someone spoke. "You're late," the voice said, amused, as if we had an appointment. My flashlight swung and caught faces in the darkness. Human faces, old faces, wrinkled and pale, peering out from between curtains and pillars as if they had always been there. Men and women in stained waiter uniforms, their eyes bright with a fanatic kind of hunger. One stepped forward, an elderly man with hair slicked back like it still mattered, and he smiled like he'd been practicing for decades. "We've been keeping the party ready," he said, "every year, every New Year's. Waiting for the right witness." My mouth went dry. "Witness to what?" I managed. He tilted his head, toward the dancers. "Ascension." I backed up, the recorder in my pocket suddenly feeling like a brick dragging me down. "This is a crime scene," I said, because my brain reached for the only language it knew. "People died here." The man's smile widened. "No," he whispered, and the lights above the ballroom flickered on. Warm, golden, impossible. People stayed. The band began again without musicians, the melody oozing from the walls. The dancers moved. Their shoes whispered over the floor in perfect time, their bodies swaying like a dream that refused to end. The elderly waiters stepped closer, forming a ring behind me, cutting off the exit without even touching it. "We needed time," the man said softly near my ear. "Time to prepare. Time to keep the door from closing. Time to learn how to live between the seconds." He inhaled like he could smell my fear. "And now we need you. Someone from outside to see it happen the right way. Someone who will tell the story." But what happened next changed everything. Because as the waltz carried the dancers past me in slow, circling loops, one woman's head turned too far, her neck cracking like dry wood, and she looked straight into my face with eyes that were dead in the most complete way possible. Her lips parted, still smiling, and a wet, breathy sound slipped out. My name. Not Marcus, not a guess, but the exact name my mother used when she was angry with me as a child. My skin went cold. The dancers weren't empty. They were full of something that had learned how to wear them. I bolted. I shoved through the ring of waiters, knocking one aside. His body felt light, papery, like he hadn't eaten real food in years. The hallway stretched wrong when I ran, longer than it should have been, doors sliding into places I didn't remember. Corridors bending like the hotel was rearranging itself to keep me. Every time I turned, the music followed, always behind me, always. Closer. I saw a staircase and sprinted down, but it dumped me back into the lobby. I sprinted toward what I thought was the exit and slammed into a wall of velvet curtains that shouldn't have been there. The building was a maze now, an elegant trap. The only thing that stayed consistent was the window at the end of the main hall. An enormous stained glass panel shaped like a fan, Art Deco lines radiating outward like sunbeams. Outside it, snow fell in a normal, comforting way, the streetlights beyond glowing like salvation. I ran for it, hearing footsteps behind me, not the soft shuffle of the elderly waiters, but the synchronized glide of the dancers. 200 bodies moving as one, the shh, rising like a tide. I reached the glass, raised my elbow, and hesitated for half a heartbeat because it was beautiful. Then the glass reflected the ballroom behind me, and in that reflection I saw something step out of the darkness between the dancers, an absence shaped like a person, a silhouette that didn't belong to anybody. The air went heavy again. The lights dimmed around the edges. The music slowed, warped, as if reality itself was being stretched thin. And I understood, in a flash of terror so clean it felt like clarity, that the hotel wasn't haunted. It was inhabited. It was a mouth, and midnight was when it swallowed. I smashed through the stained glass. The sound was explosive, bright like a gunshot made of crystals. Shards tore my coat, sliced my cheek, bit into my hands. I fell forward into freezing air and dropped 2 stories, hitting the ground hard enough to knock the world white for a second. Pain shot up my leg, something cracked, something tore, and I screamed. But the sound felt tiny compared to the music still booming behind the broken window. I dragged myself across the snow, leaving a dark smear, my fingers numb, my breath ragged. When I looked back, the stained glass window was intact again, perfect, unbroken, like it had never been touched. The next morning, the police treated me like a liar with a concussion. They searched the Vandermeer. It was empty. No bodies, no decorations, no tapes. Just dust and rot and silence. My recorder had 1 file left. 1 frame, corrupted but visible like a photograph burned into the screen. The ballroom packed with 200 guests and a ring of waiters, all staring directly into the camera, their smiles wide and identical. And in the center of them, caught mid-turn as if I'd been dancing too, was me, standing upright, clean suit, head tilted, smiling like I'd finally joined the party. I tried to tell myself it was a glitch, that my mind filled in gaps, that trauma makes convincing lies. But what happened next changed everything, because that night in the hospital, as I lay awake listening to fireworks in the distance, a champagne flute appeared on the tray table beside my bed. It was filled to the rim, bubbles rising endlessly. A neat, gold label clung to the stem, aged and perfect, stamped with a date that should have been impossible. Deck 31, 1982. And from somewhere in the corner of the room, very softly, like a band warming up far away, I heard the first notes of a waltz begin. I can't include citations in this story because access to the necessary verification sources isn't available in this turn. Story 3. The Midnight Calls. The first time I heard my own voice on the line, I thought I'd finally cracked. Because it wasn't just similar to me, it was me down to the tiny stumble I make before I say certain words. The same breath pattern, the same tired patience I use with panicked callers. The station clock above the soundboard flickered between 11:58 and 12:03 like it couldn't decide what reality we were in. And every phone line lit up at once, blinking so fast it looked like the console was having a seizure. My voice came through the headphones, low and urgent. "Sadie, listen to me. Don't look at any countdown. Don't let them count. You have 2 minutes." I couldn't move. My fingers hovered over the fader like my hands no longer belonged to me. And behind the glass of the booth, the empty hallway seemed to stretch longer than it should, as if the building had exhaled and made more space for something to enter. I swallowed, forced air into my lungs, and whispered, "Who is this?" And my own voice answered, "It's you. And if you do what you're about to do, it notices you." But what happened next changed everything. Because in the dead silence between those words, the studio monitors hissed with static that sounded exactly like a crowd counting down. Thousands of voices layered together, and underneath it, another count, slower, backwards, like something patient was answering from the other side. 4 hours earlier, my biggest problem was the same one I always had on overnights. Staying awake while the rest of Montana drank champagne and kissed strangers and pretended time was a clean reset. KVRN-FM was a small station in a small town, the kind that still took live calls because the audience liked hearing their own neighbors on the air. I'd done my share of terrifying phone calls before. Years on 911 left me with a voice that stayed calm even when my heart didn't. But radio was supposed to be different. Radio, music requests, drunk dedications, lonely people who didn't want to be lonely at midnight. So when the first caller came in at 9 p.m. Mountain Time, right as I was introducing a midnight countdown mix, I smiled and hit the button like it was nothing. You're on KVRN, I said. Who am I talking to tonight? A woman breathed into the line like she'd been running. Her voice was thin, vibrating, and she didn't answer the question. She said, "It's going to happen at midnight. You have to tell someone." I leaned toward the mic. "What's going to happen?" I asked, already feeling that old 911 instinct waking up inside my ribs. She whispered, "Don't let them count." Then the line went dead, but not cleanly. There was a quick burst of digital distortion, a stuttering chirp that made my teeth ache, like the sound you'd get if you recorded a scream and played it through a broken machine. 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed with an emergency alert. Times Square, New York. Mass panic at midnight. Multiple fatalities. The details were messy, unclear, shifting. People reporting a stampede, others saying everyone froze at once like mannequins, then started running without knowing why. I stared at the headline until my eyes blurred, my skin cold. The caller's voice replayed in my head. "It's going to happen at midnight." I told myself it was coincidence. New Year's is chaos everywhere, but what happened next changed everything, because at exactly 10 p.m. Mountain, the second caller came in from Chicago, and he said the same words with the same trembling cadence, as if they were reading from a script written by fear. "Midnight," the man whispered. "Please." "It happens at midnight." I sat up straighter. "Sir, what's your name?" I asked. There was a pause, a small swallow. "Aaron," he said. I'm at Navy Pier. They're doing a big countdown." His breathing grew ragged, like he was trying not to cry. "Everyone's laughing. They don't see it." My throat tightened. "See what?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, because that's what you do when someone is about to fall apart. Aaron exhaled and the sound shook. "The spaces," he said, "between the numbers on the screen, when they change, there's something in the space, like it's leaning through." The line crackled, and for a second I heard a faint chorus behind him. 10, 9, 8. As if the crowd was already counting, even though it wasn't midnight yet. I tried to keep him talking. "Aaron, listen to me. Walk away. Get inside somewhere. Find security." He made a small sound that might have been a laugh, but it was wrong, flat, hopeless. "It's already looking at us," he whispered. Then the line died with the same stuttering distortion. At 10:02 p.m. Mountain, the alert came. Chicago, Navy Pier. Fatalities at midnight. Witnesses, confusion, mass hysteria, people claiming they saw something on the countdown display and couldn't look away. I stared at the soundboard. My hands started to shake, and for a second I smelled the memory of blood and antiseptic from my old job. The pattern was forming so clearly it felt like a noose tightening. The calls came before the deaths. The calls came before the midnight of whatever time zone the caller was in. And every caller sounded like they were begging me to do something I didn't yet understand. But what happened next changed everything. Because at 11:00 p.m. Mountain, the third caller came from Los Angeles, and this time I didn't let them hang up. "Stay with me," I said the moment the line connected, sharper than I intended. "Don't hang up. Tell me where you are." A woman inhaled like she was trying to hold herself together. "Jennifer," she whispered. I could hear music and cheering behind her, New Year's energy, bright and careless. "I'm downtown. The countdown screen is huge." I squeezed my eyes shut for half a second. "Jennifer," I said, slow and firm, "you need to look away from the screen right now." She let out a soft, terrified whimper. "It's hard," she breathed. "It's like it pulls." Her voice trembled as if she was fighting her own neck muscles. "Sadie," she said suddenly, and my stomach flipped because I hadn't told her my name on the air. "We make it open," she whispered. "Every year we make it open. When we all count together, we point at the same moment. We make a door with our attention." My fingers went numb. "A door to what?" I asked, even though my brain didn't want the answer. Jennifer's voice dropped to a thin hiss. To the thing that counts back, she said. The line crackled violently, and I heard the crowd behind her starting a practice countdown, laughing. 10, 9, and Jennifer sobbed, "No, no, don't!" Then she screamed, sharp and raw, and the call cut off. At 11:02 p.m. Mountain, the LA alert came in. Deaths at midnight. Reports of people staring at screens, collapsing, stampeding. People saying the countdown glitched and showed numbers that weren't numbers. People saying they heard something answer them in the silence after 0. I didn't breathe for what felt like minutes. I opened my laptop with shaking hands and looked up the names. Rebecca in New York, Aaron in Chicago, Jennifer in Los Angeles. They were real. They were in the reports. Dead, all of them, each one exactly when their time zone hit midnight. And then the part that made my skin crawl. There were short quotes attributed to witnesses. Final words people heard them say. Rebecca, "Don't let them count." Aaron, "It's in the spaces." Jennifer, "We make it open." The exact words they'd told me. But what happened next changed everything, because that meant the callers weren't predicting their deaths. They were calling me from inside the moment that killed, them pushing their last breaths backward through time like a hand reaching out of a closing door. By 11:45 p.m. Mountain, the station felt wrong. The air had that pre-storm pressure, ears-popping heaviness that makes you want to swallow. The hallway outside the booth was empty, but the darkness at the far end looked deeper than it should, like a shadow that didn't belong to any light. The old wall clock in the lobby ticked too loud, then too quiet, then not at all. I tried to call the station manager. It went to voicemail. I tried to call the police non-emergency line. The call wouldn't connect, just a soft tone that sounded like someone breathing. I pulled up the town's emergency alert system and drafted a message, my fingers clumsy, and I kept hovering over send, because I didn't know what to tell people. Don't celebrate? Don't count down? Don't look at clocks? It sounded insane. It sounded like the beginning of a mass panic that would get people hurt anyway. And then the phone rang again. One line, not all of them, a single steady ring that made my heart slam into my ribs. I answered. "KVRN," I said, and my voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. Silence for half a second, then, "Sadie." My own voice, not a recording, alive, breathing, terrified. "You're going to try to warn them," it said. "You're going to make it worse." I gripped the edge of the desk until my knuckles hurt. "Who are you?" I whispered, even though I knew. "It's you," my voice said, and there was a sob hiding under the words. "I'm calling from after. I'm calling from the part you don't remember." My skin went cold. "What happens?" I asked. The line crackled. "If you say Happy New Year, if you count with them, if you make them look at it, if you acknowledge it, then it acknowledges you back," my voice said. "You have 2 minutes at 11:59. You have to fill the space. Don't give it silence." My throat tightened. "Fill it with what?" I asked. My voice on the phone whispered, "Anything but the countdown." When the call ended, the studio went so quiet it felt staged, like a set waiting for an actor. Then at 11:58, every phone line lit up at once, ringing in perfect sync like a choir. The monitors hissed with static again, and this time the static didn't sound random. It sounded like thousands of people whispering the same number at the same time, layered and hungry. The digital clock over the board flickered. 11:58. 11:58, 11:58, as if it was stuck on the edge. I looked down at my hands and realized I was shaking so hard I could barely breathe. Then from the speakers, a low tone seeped in beneath the static, a frequency that wasn't music but felt like pressure against my teeth. I glanced at the on-air light. It was already red. I hadn't pressed it. My microphone was live. I leaned in because there was nothing else to do. and I spoke directly into the silence that felt like a throat about to swallow. "If you're listening," I said, and my voice sounded steadier than I felt, "do not watch any countdown. Turn off your TV. Turn your phone face down. Close your eyes at 11:59. Don't count. Don't say the numbers. Just breathe with me." The phones rang harder, sharper. The clock flickered wildly, skipping. 11:59. 11:12. 12:33. 00. Then back. My ears popped and the walls seemed to lean inward like the building was listening too. Outside, distant fireworks started early, little cracks in the night, impatient. I kept talking, pouring words into the air like sand into a drain. "Breathe in," I said. "Hold it. Breathe out. Listen to my voice, not the clock." The static rose in the speakers, and under it I heard a crowd, my town's crowd, thousands of people, beginning to count down anyway, their voices faint but real, drifting in from the world outside. 10, 9, 8. My stomach lurched. The studio, lights dimmed, then brightened in a sick rhythm like a heartbeat. The phones screamed. The low tone deepened, and for a second I heard something else. Another count, slower behind the human one, as if something enormous was matching us. Amused. I squeezed my eyes shut and spoke faster, louder. "Don't say it," I begged, and it came out like prayer. "Don't give it 0. I filled the air with words, stories, nonsense, anything, because silence felt like a door. 7, 6, 5. The pressure in the room grew unbearable. My lungs felt crushed like the air had become thick gel. 4, 3, 2. In the last second before it hit, the static dropped out completely and there was a perfect, terrible quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you aware you're alive and could stop being alive at any moment. 1. I kept my eyes shut. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I didn't let my brain form the word 0. And in that heavy silence, something shifted, like a huge presence leaning close to my ear to see if I would acknowledge it. A sound brushed the edge of hearing, not a voice, but a suggestion of one, like a smile in the dark. Then somewhere, someone screamed. Not in the studio, outside, far away, carried on winter air. Another scream answered it, then another, and for one horrible moment I was sure the pattern had won anyway. That midnight had taken my town like it had taken New York and Chicago and LA. But the screams faded into fireworks, and the fireworks into distant cheering, and the pressure in the room released so suddenly I fell forward onto the desk and sobbed without meaning to. When I woke up, the clock said 12:47 a.m. My throat hurt like I'd been shouting for hours. The studio looked wrong. Papers scattered, chair tipped over, a headphone set snapped clean in half like someone had twisted it. The phone lines were dead, not ringing, not buzzing, just black. The on-air light was off, my recording computer was on, but the last file was missing. The entire minute from 11:59 to 12 Studa had been torn out of the timeline like someone had physically stolen time. I stumbled to the lobby and pushed the door open. The town was quiet in that post-midnight way, as if everyone had safely made it through. Later I checked the news. No incident in Montana, no deaths at midnight, not one. The pattern had skipped us. For the first time all night I felt something like relief. Thin, fragile, temporary. Then my email notification chimed. No sender name, no address I recognized, just a subject line that made my skin go numb. Thank you for 2024. There was an attachment, an audio file. I didn't click it. I stared at it until the screen went dim. And then, without me touching anything, the file name changed, letters rearranging themselves slowly into a new message, like something learning how to write with human tools. See you next year. I can't include citations in this response because external source access isn't available in this turn.